Welcome to the A Slice of Medieval Christmas special. As you know, we always try to do something a little different at Christmas, be it chatting with Matthew and Stephen over at Rock, Paper, Swords, or deciding who we would invite for Christmas dinner and where to seat them so they don't start the Wars of the Roses all over again. So this year, we thought we would take a deep dive into what went into a medieval Christmas. And who better to help us than Toni Mount? Toni studies, teaches and writes about history. As well as her weekly classes, Toni has created online courses for medievalcourses.com and is the author of the successful and absolutely fabulous Sebastian Foxley series of medieval murder mysteries. She's also the author of several popular non-fiction books, including How to Survive in Anglo-Saxon England and How to Survive in Medieval England. So we thought Toni might know a little bit about medieval Christmases. So, Toni, what were the main elements of a medieval Christmas?
Well, you might be surprised that it was very similar in some ways to how we celebrate. Lots of food, lots of drink. Church was compulsory, but being prayerful was optional. Lots of hospitality, gift giving, entertainment, mystery and mummers plays, games, wassailing, decorating the house and church with evergreens. So an awful lot was pretty much like today. The only thing missing would be Christmas cards, Christmas crackers, turkey and roast potatoes for dinner, and a Christmas tree. But they did make garlands of holly and ivy. So, you made a big occasion of it.
Yeah. Didn't they have a Yule log or something as well every year?
Yes, the Yule log was introduced to this country by the Vikings. So it was Odin's gift to the family or the Lord to keep them warm, and it was supposed to burn for the 12 days of Christmas. So yes, they certainly did have a Yule log, and it was also the Vikings who introduced the boar as a centerpiece, because they would sacrifice a boar at Christmas, decorate it with garlands of evergreens and serve it. So, that actually lasted well into the medieval period. And we don't always bother with the Yule log now, do we, with central heating. Roast pork is often an alternative for Boxing Day. Perhaps.
Yeah, my mum always does a ham and a turkey.
Yeah, turkeys and roast potatoes, of course. I ought to point that out, that they come from America.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to wait till around 1500 for the introduction of the turkey.
Now, you mentioned 1500 and you mentioned the Vikings, and it occurs to me that when we talk about the medieval period, it's a massive, great period of time, and things must have changed a bit during that period. You mentioned the influence of the Vikings. So over that period, from sort of Anglo-Saxon times to later medieval, were there significant changes in these Christmas celebrations?
Well, yes. I mean, at the beginning of the medieval period, which I date from around 410 AD, when the Romans shoved off and left Britannia to its own devices. and then the Anglo-Saxons filtered in. Well, the Anglo-Saxons were pagans. The Romans had brought forced Christianity upon the Britons. So to begin with, you've got pagan ideas. But the Romans, before they became Christian, used to celebrate the midwinter solstice with the feast of Saturnalia, the god Saturn. And it was all about eating and drinking and enjoying yourself and cheering up the shortest day of the year. So the Anglo-Saxons, as with most Northern European pagans, similarly celebrated the shortest day as the return of the sun when day length begins to get longer. So yes, at the beginning of the medieval period, we were pagan mostly, but still celebrated that midwinter time just to cheer ourselves up, I should think. Cold, dark, miserable.
Yeah.
And then, of course, towards the end of the medieval period, into the 1500s, we've gone through a long period of proper, full Christian worship, according to the Roman Catholic Church. But then, of course, suddenly in around 1540, all that is swept away. So again, there would have been changes at the end. Yes, not quite back to paganism, but once you've got the Protestants, there are sects among the Protestants who really don't approve of Christmas because it's not in the Bible. So they're the sort of forerunners of the Puritans who do away with Christmas. Miserable lot.
Yeah.
So we have the church traditions, don't we? Like Advent and Twelfth Night. That were, I suppose, in medieval times, they were a lot more significant than we see them now. I mean, now Twelfth Night is when you take down your Christmas tree.
Yes. Today, people sometimes complain Christmas starts much too early. But the medieval run-up to Christmas would start on the 30th of November.
Oh, right.
Or the Sunday closest. That is Advent Sunday. And I do have trouble working it all out because in theory, from Advent to Christmas Day was a time of fasting, not quite seriously as Lent, but you weren't supposed to eat meat, you were supposed to eat fish, but I think dairy products were allowed, so cheese and eggs, which aren't allowed in Lent. But having said that, they actually celebrate a number of feast days during Advent. In particular, you've got the feast of St. Nicholas on the 6th of December, which was actually a time for giving gifts to children because St. Nicholas was the patron saint of children, amongst a dozen other things. And if it's a feast, obviously you're going to have something other than fish. But then Christmas Eve was very definitely a fast day. And then you go to church at midnight for midnight mass, and then it would all kick off. And then after Christmas, you've got more feast days. The Feast of the Holy Innocents, when Herod murdered the children. Then you got New Year, which was also a day for gift giving. There's actually a document from Edward IV's household in the 1460s and 70s, which describes exactly how presents should be given to the king on New Year's Day, that he gets out of bed and stands on his foot sheet to receive these gifts. So it's obviously an early morning thing. And what sort of gifts are suitable? Usually things like gold cups or bolts of silk and cloth, or nice expensive things. He also gives gifts on New Year's Day as well. And then, of course, you've got 12th night, the Feast of the Three Kings, which again can be a day for gift giving. And if you're really enthusiastic about Christmas and have the leisure, you can go on having your Christmas period right up to Candlemas on the 2nd of February, when the Virgin Mary was purified after the birth of Christ, 6 weeks after his birth. So you got the end of November to the beginning of February as Christmas.
You said earlier that, obviously it's midwinter, it's a dark time of the year. I mean, maybe these celebrations were kind of extended to sort of cover a lot of that period rather than just a brief bit at the end of December. But when you talked about gift giving, I don't know whether you know this or not, but was there a point, obviously Anglo-Saxons started off as pagans and so on, and then were more or less converted, and then you've got the Viking pagans coming in and so on. But at that point, I guess round about the 700, 800, 900s, the whole Christmas thing must have been fairly muddled, I assume, because you'd have different sorts of celebrations going on within England, wouldn't you?
Oh, yes. I mean, there are local traditions.
Yeah.
And gift giving, or if you didn't actually give gifts, you could give alms to the poor. And a wealthy lord would give gifts in the form of inviting the locals to dine at his table, that sort of thing. But certainly there were muddles. I mean, there's still the hangover in Kent, and I know down in the West Country too, of wassailing your trees in the orchard. Now that goes right back to pagan times with the worship of trees, so that could be Celtic further back than the Anglo-Saxons. And you tip a bit of your wassail ale round the roots of the tree to ensure a good fruit harvest in the autumn. So that would be relevant some places and not others. Plus, the north of England first became Christian in the Celtic tradition. Before we had the Synod of Whitby, where the whole country settled for being Roman Catholic, they were actually Celtic Catholic in the north, which was different. And at various times, Kent was Christian, but Essex wasn't. And Wessex, we now think, actually had a few Christians left over from the Roman period. Parts of Wessex remained with these little Christian enclaves, even while the King of Wessex was pagan. So, because there are special laws passed for the benefit of the Welsh people of Wessex, but Welsh referred to the Britons.
Yeah.
And there's evidence in Wareham for a church of St. Martin, which had been in constant use since the Roman period. And it seems to have been Christian all that time. So
I've been there. I've been to St. Martin's in Wareham. I was there a few months ago, actually. It's been damaged a few times.
yes.
So Christmas in that period is a kind of tapestry, isn't it? It's all sorts of different local traditions. It's something you celebrate locally because you do most things locally in that time period. Whereas today we think of Christmas as this huge megalith, which covers the whole world, or at least a lot of it. But in those days, it was a very local thing.
Yes, but I mean, even today in Spain, children get presents on the 6th of January,
Yeah.
not Christmas Day.
Mm.
So there are still variations.
Yeah, it's quite nice to think there are, really.
Yeah, and Germany, I think, still has Black Peter.
Yes.
Picks out the children who've been naughty, who are not in line for a nice present.
It's all about controlling the kids.
Yes. Is that what it is?
I'm just thinking, you said about Edward IV's tradition of getting his presents. The royal court must have been magnificent, well, at any time during Anglo-Saxon and medieval times at Christmas.
Yes, yes. I mean, the whole point of a big celebration was to show off. Ostentatious was the watchword. You did everything to excess, simply to prove that you were wealthy and powerful enough to do so. And I think it's significant that two kings who really went to town on this were King John, having fallen out with his barons, did a really stupendous Christmas to which he invited his enemies and gave them lavish presents, literally trying to bring them on board and convince them he was a worthy king and that they should support him. And then in the 1350s, John's son, Henry III, again had a falling out with his barons, Simon de Montfort and co. He did the same, a huge celebration of Christmas to which he invited all the rebellious barons and tried to buy favour with them. But it didn't work because one of the things they were accusing him of was being a spendthrift.
Yes.
So it really had the opposite effect. It made things worse. So the court would go to town, everyone would wear their best, servants would be given new liveries as part of their Christmas, but everybody got a new outfit, new shoes for winter, your winter apparel. So even the servants would be wearing new clothes and would look good. And of course, the rich would bring on the jewels and everything else. And the 6th of January, as the Feast of the Three Kings, was quite often a crown wearing. And not just for the kings, the dukes would wear their coronets and all of that down the scale. So the court would go as far as possible. Food, there would be more food than you can imagine, and it would contain expensive spices, and sugar would be used, which of course was extremely expensive. And they also liked to cover things in gold. One tradition was the mince pie. Now, mince pie was not an after dinner nibble. It was part of the main course, a huge pie made of salt crust pastry. So it wasn't meant to be eaten. It was literally a sort of pastry casserole dish. And in it, they would put all the offcuts of meat that weren't beautiful enough to serve on a platter. So you get goose and pork and chicken and beef and whatever was going, bennies and offcuts would all go in with fruit and spices. And sometimes for Christmas, instead of making a sort of round shape with the pastry, they would make it oval and call it cradle. And they would model a baby Jesus in salt crust pastry and put him on top of the cradle and cover that whole lot in gold leaf and bake it. And you can bake gold. And of course, this was really wonderful. I'm afraid it was Oliver Cromwell's lot who made the mince pie what it is today. Yeah. A really sorry little affair. He banned these cradle pies as idolatrous because of the model of the baby Jesus on top. So mince pies were banned. So what people did was they started making little bite-sized mince pies that you could eat quickly before the sort of anti-Christmas lot turned up to tell you that you couldn't have it. So it's the Puritans who forced upon us today's little mince pies. And of course, the meat got left out. But at the king's table, they would gild various dishes. Meatballs were sort of gilded to look fabulous. And you can eat gold. It passes through unchanged. And it was actually the dung collector's perk to collect any gold leaf he found when he emptied the latrines and sort of wash it off and return it to the goldsmiths for recycling. So, yeah, he would be paid for the gold. So nothing was wasted.
But when you think about you come across these documents sometimes of feasts and they're so lavish. They must have cost an absolute fortune.
That was the whole idea, to show off.
Yeah, yeah.
But the other thing I've come across is the Lord of Misrule.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who was he?
Well, there are a number of different versions on this, and I really can't get my head around it. We know that at court for Christmas, they would appoint a Lord of Misrule, and it was up to him to arrange the entertainments. And also on Holy Innocents' Day, they would actually appoint a child to be the Lord of Misrule, or even a servant, and they could order people to do strange things. For instance, you could order the king to do the washing up. So that was the sort of thing. But the boy king, as he was called, was usually a child of around 12 who would be dressed as a king just for the one day. But the Lord of Misrule seems to have gone on for the official 12 days of Christmas to supervise the entertainments, really, and add a bit of craziness to the proceedings. And with the wassail flowing freely, I would think that was quite an easy job.
Well, I used the Lord of Misrule idea in a novel, but I still find it quite difficult to believe.
Yes, no one seems to have documented exactly what went on at the time, or at least I haven't found it. You just get references to the Lord of Misrule. I don't know how far they could go. I don't suppose the king would have gone to the kitchen to do the washing up.
I think common sense would tell you not to go too far, wouldn't it? Because, yes, you might be the Lord for the next 12 days, but after that, the king's back in charge. And if you've humiliated him, he's not going to be very happy.
No, depends how much he enters into the fun of it, really.
You'd have to have a cast iron contract. I can tell you to do anything, and you can't do anything back to me ever. Then I'll be Lord of Misrule. But if you're going to have a go at me once you get back in charge, I'm not doing it.
But I guess there must have been a tradition. If there was a tradition, then presumably that would be
Yeah.
okay, unless you went ridiculously
Yeah.
far.
You know how now, well, they issue honours on the King's birthday and things like that. But didn't they used to issue pardons for things as well? Or am I making that up? You know, Christmas, they'd free so many prisoners or whatever.
Yes, I'm really not sure when that tradition began. I know that a new king, after his coronation, would usually issue a whole load of pardons to show that he was going to be merciful. But I really don't know when these sort of New Year's honours list started. Haven't come across that in medieval times.
No, I haven't either. I just wondered if you knew. That's going to have to go on my list of things to look up and see if to look out for, rather, in case I spot something.
Yeah. So you've described how the court celebrated. What about at the other end of the scale? What about the ordinary common folk? What did they do at Christmas time, apart from possibly starve?
Well, common people celebrated as much as they possibly could. The fact that Advent was time of fasting meant you would save up your good food for a good feed over the Christmas period. But usually your local lord would feed you on Christmas Day, at least. That was the tradition. But they would have gone out and gathered holly and ivy and mistletoe on Christmas Eve to decorate their houses. It's quite interesting. Holly, spiky, was considered to represent the man as the warrior and the blood. So men gathered the holly. Women were represented by the clinging, soft ivy. There was actually a tradition that if ivy grew up outside your house, it was a house ruled by women. But if you pulled the ivy off, the chances were that the household would descend into chaos. Mistletoe was very important to the Druids because they saw it as a plant which did not grow from the earth like everything else. It grew magically and it should never touch the ground. And each berry on it represented fertility. As pagans, the Celts and then the Anglo-Saxons celebrated with mistletoe, and each berry represented a man and a woman getting together for more than a kiss. But it was the church which said, no, a kiss is more than adequate. But it was still banned from churches. You could not take mistletoe into church. Decorate church holly and ivy, but no mistletoe. Church you would attend on midnight mass and again on Christmas morning, but church services were very different in those days. The priest conducted the service beyond the rood screen, and at the elevation of the host, a little bell would be rung, and that was to call the congregation's attention so they could bow their head and cross themselves and say a prayer. But the rest of the Christmas service, you'd be standing there chatting with your mates and comparing whose Christmas gown was the poshest and what were you going to have for dinner, and inviting friends, well, come round to us because we've got pork, and oh no, come round to us because we've got goose, and this sort of thing. So actually being religious was a better way of showing your religion was to be hospitable, and particularly to invite poor people to share what you had. You know, if there was a beggar outside the church, invite them to Christmas dinner. That would be your act of charity. But then you'd have music, everybody could sing and dance, and carols were not about Jesus. Carols were actually songs that you danced to. So they would have a good rhythm. Most people could play a sort of recorder type thing, or a penny whistle, or bang a drum, and certainly singing. Everybody played games, some of which we've got the very restrained remnants of today. You've heard of blind man's buff.
Yes.
Where someone is blindfolded and got to go and find people. Well, blind man's buff goes right back to medieval times, if not before, except that it was played in a hall, a mead hall maybe, or the great hall of the manor house, with an open fire in the middle of the floor. And the idea was to get the blind man to accidentally stand in the fire and burn his shoes. That was the part of the game. So he was trying to avoid the fire, and you were trying to, I'm over here, sort of thing. So, you know, come and get me, and hoping he'd come through the fire by accident. So, yeah, some of the games were quite risky.
You've got me thinking now, Toni, because your two most recent books, How to Survive in Medieval England, came out first, didn't it?
Yes.
And then How to Survive in Anglo-Saxon England.
Yes.
Were there any dangers associated with Christmas, other than having to step into the fire if you were blind, if you were playing blind man's buff?
Well, it could be dangerous. One of the things that the court liked to do was to roast something like a swan or a peacock. Instead of plucking it, you would skin it, so that all the feathers came off attached to the skin. Then you'd spit roast your bird, having stuffed it with stuffing we would recognise, mainly breadcrumbs with sage and thyme and various other herbs and spices. And then you'd spit roast it, and then you'd redress it in the skin with a wire to support the neck, and decorate it and arrange the feathers so it looks as if the bird had just been persuaded to come and sit on the plate. Now, putting the skin back on, you are introducing salmonella. Goodness knows what. But the ingredients in the stuffing, they somehow knew to use things like sage and marjoram and thyme, which all had antiseptic properties. So they're kind of warding off the salmonella problem by stuffing the bird, and of course that helped it keep its shape as well. One problem with swans and peacocks is that the meat doesn't taste very nice. So often they cooked a goose and dressed it in the skin and feathers of the swan or peacock.
A medieval cheat and a half, isn't it? Cook a goose and make it look like a swan. I like that.
Something medieval cooks really enjoyed doing was making things, making foodstuffs look like something they weren't. So things like a cockintrice with the front end of a pig and the back end of a cockerel. Also things like making pork look like some other meat, or making fish look like chicken. And these were sort of food jokes, and they just loved doing it, or dyeing the meat bright blue or something. Or, as I've said, gilding it in gold to make it look like a slab of gold on your plate, when actually it's haddock underneath or something. So yeah, food jokes were very popular with the upper classes, and of course there were always dangers in mixing these things.
Of course, the dangerous Christmas was 1066, wasn't it? When William the Conqueror's coronation, and what was it? They thought they heard cheering inside the abbey, and the soldiers thought they'd heard that the people in the abbey had attacked the king, so they started killing people outside the abbey.
I heard that there was a hailstorm or something, and they thought that the people outside were throwing stones. So William sent his soldiers out to clout a few heads and everything, and it turned into a riot.
Right. So that was a dangerous Christmas as well.
Yeah, well, the one before wasn't very good, was it?
Oh no, I forgot. Yeah,
No.
Edward the Confessor died just after Christmas, didn't he?
Yeah, was it something he ate?
Yeah. Yeah. Did he get a gift of something edible from Earl Harold?
Yes, could have done.
So, what's your favourite medieval Christmas tradition, Toni?
There's a fabulous one. I briefly mentioned entertainments, and Mama's plays were very popular, and so were mystery plays. Now, mystery plays tell the stories from the Bible, so that those who couldn't read can watch the play and learn the contents of the Bible. And though we tend to think of mystery plays as a summer thing, they were actually a winter thing in the first place. And my favourite one is Noah's Ark. Now, mystery plays were performed all over Europe, but England had its own version of Noah. And in it is a character who's not really in the Bible and doesn't appear in any other mystery play in Europe, and that's Mrs. Noah. And she is my absolute favourite character. Now, she would have been played by a man dressed as a woman. And in the English version, they built the ark, they got all the animals inside it, they're ready to go. So Mrs. Noah goes down the pub with her mates, and they buy a whole barrel of ale to celebrate, and then it starts spitting with rain. So Noah comes barging into the pub and says, "Come on, wife, you've got to get in the ark." And Mrs. Noah says, "No way, we've just broached this barrel. It's cost me money. There is no way I am leaving until we've drunk it." So Noah goes away again, comes back a second time. "Come on, it's raining properly now, you've got to come." "No, I'm only coming if all my friends can come as well." "No, God says just you, we've got to go." She still refuses. Third time, Noah comes with his 3 sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, and they pick Mrs. Noah up, each one taking a limb, and frog march her out of the pub and up the gangplank into the ark. Now, this Mrs. Noah was so popular in England that she is actually the forerunner of pantomime dames. That's my favourite medieval Christmas tradition.
I had no idea.
No, I didn't. I've heard it, obviously heard of mystery plays and mummers and all the rest of it, but I haven't heard that one. So that's great. I love that.
I want to see it. That'd be brilliant if somebody put that one on now. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, you have to have a man dressed as a woman.
Well, yes, that sort of that makes it somewhat more amusing, presumably.
Yes.
I love the idea that it's the wife that's in the pub.
Yeah.
That's how it should be.
Yeah. Yeah, look, but these traditions, though, you've mentioned a couple that kind of not modern, but ones which have endured for a long time, which started a very, very long time ago. It's amazing how some of these things do carry on.
Yeah.
Yeah, from mince pies to pantomime games.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, especially for our Christmas special and giving us brilliant insight into medieval Christmases and Noah's wife. I'm going to go away with Noah's wife now. It's like I need to find somewhere where they're doing Noah's
Yeah,
wife as a mystery play.
that's a thing now. Yeah, we're sold on that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's been lovely chatting to you.
It's been wonderful. Thank you. I wasn't sure how we do this one, but I think it's been brilliant. I've learned so much.
Yeah, me too. And all of it very interesting.
Yeah, very much so. So thank you very much, Toni, for joining us. It's been absolutely wonderful. I hope you have a fantastic Christmas
Yes.
And you too.
and all the best for a wonderful new year.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely. As you said, a jolly good natter.
Yeah.
Thanks, Toni. That was wonderful. Do join us next time when we will be chatting with Elizabeth Chadwick about the remarkable marital career of Joan of Kent. But for now, all that remains is for me and Derek to wish you all a very Merry Christmas, and hopefully we will see you, or you will hear us, next year. I've been Sharon Bennett Connolly. Happy Christmas, no, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
And I'm Derek Birks. And while Sharon's convulsing into laughter, I'll also miss you a Merry Christmas. I think. Well, we've made a complete hash of that. We haven't had anything to drink either.
Yeah. Merry Christmas, everyone.